project management. For our July episode, we're featuring a patriotic piece here based off the book Freedom's Forge by Arthur Herman. This book centers around two key men who led the industrial surge of production to meet the massive demands of the U.S. military during World War II. Now, on the surface, this doesn't appear to have anything to do with project management. However, you'll be pleasantly surprised to find that there are a ton of project management nuggets embedded in this jewel of a book. Namely, how did the United States achieve the fastest and largest military buildup in world history? So go ahead and grab a flag, put on some Francis Scott Key as we bridge from meager beginnings to a world class military in breathtaking speed. We're going big and rich, so save a horse and ride a tank off into the sunset, my friends. Finally, remember to stay tuned to the end for my pithy summary and your corresponding PMI code. Now, for some background, in spite of the growing ineptitude over the last 3 or 4 years, the U.S. military is still seen as the predominant armed force in the world. However, that was a far cry from the case leading up to World War II. Even though World War I was still in the rearview mirror, the U.S. was light years away from being prepared for the scale of World War II. Even adjusting for inflation, the U.S. spent over 12 times more on World War II than World War I. That is a massive increase. And to complicate matters, the rapid and massive scaling took a major toll on all Americans, not just the soldiers. I remember my grandma telling stories about saving sugar rations for a month just to bake a little birthday cake for my uncle. Even more staggering was the fact that 20 times more people died in production, like making airplanes, than did on the battlefield in both 1942 and 1943. One of the biggest themes throughout Freedom's Forge is the need for unity. Resources, both time and money, were so scarce that everyone had to be united in their purpose. Based off his research, author Arthur Herman estimated that until 1942, unions held up production by as much as 20%. And unfortunately, the unions they were hyper focused on a few non-critical items that were completely counter to the goals of US military production. It wasn't until President FDR himself put some appropriate pressure on the unions so they could resolve this roadblock. Another example of this was cast iron Charlie Sorensen, who was a very talented engineer and production manager. However, Charlie's nickname of cast iron was well deserved as he often butted heads with just about everyone. You could say that old cast iron was the Alec Baldwin of the 1940s. If you disagreed with him, things did not go well. Eventually, it led cast iron to a diminished role in the wartime effort. This reminds me of one of the most talented engineers I've ever worked with, and we'll just call him Bob. Bob developed many elegant designs, but he was an army of one. When you worked with Bob on a team, you did not make suggestions, you simply did what was assigned to you. If something didn't work, it wasn't Bob's design flaw, you executed something wrong. Bob's approach sabotaged several projects and eventually led to his firing, proving the Bible proverb true: one bad apple can spoil the bunch. Perhaps the most succinct way to put unity is the Intel statement of disagree and commit. There can often be dissension, but everyone needs to commit to the plan of record and to be unified. Planning. Now, in the PM world, it's a given that planning is key, and that certainly proves true in Freedom's Forge. To FDR's credit, he listened to his advisors and started the military buildup prior to Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Although FDR underestimated the resources needed for World War II, and to his credit, most experts did, FDR understood that the U.S. military could not scale up overnight. The best example of planning in Freedom's Forge comes from the central character of Bill Knudsen. Like Cast Iron Charlie, Bill was an excellent engineer and production manager. However, what set Bill apart were three things. One, Bill was stoic, even during intense debates regarding crucial sink or swim moments of World War II production. Second, Bill was methodical in his planning. He was able to break down a problem from a high level down to the smallest of details. A prime example of this was engineering subassemblies so they were bolt on ready for the main production line. This streamlined or lean approach has been adopted by many leading manufacturers today, like Toyota. I know because I use this lean principle like an old pair of shoes over and over again. Finally, Bill let the free market, like the auto industry, imagine this be free in collaborating with others to find the best solution quickly, which is a perfect segue to our final section. Collaboration. Even with the proliferation of quickly acquiring data through Google, YouTube, project managers must collaborate well or they will fail. For me, this is the number one takeaway from Freedom's Forge. So, without further ado, let's jump in and look at a few relevant examples here. So, challenge number one, most of the Army's designs, such as tanks, were not very manufacturable. It wasn't until the Army collaborated with some Ford engineers that the tanks could be made efficiently and quick enough to meet the immense needs over in Europe and elsewhere. Challenge number two, the shipyard back east was getting crushed by a similar shipyard out in Portland, Oregon. Yes, Portland was actually good at something back in the day. Of course, I can say that because it's where I live. Anyways, back to our regular programming. It wasn't until this Northeast plant opened up an employee suggestion forum that this plant back east started to catch up. In fact, this Northeast plant implemented nearly 200 employee improvement ideas in order to catch up to the plant out in Portland, Oregon. Now, a final example of collaboration is Henry Kaiser, the other central figure in Freedom's Forge. One of Kaiser's main strengths was listening to his employees and not over constraining a project. If budget adherence was the main goal, he would often adjust the schedule or the scope to achieve the main goal. Another key component to Kaiser was that he was the opposite of Cast Iron Charlie. Kaiser was the consummate cheerleader for his teams. An interesting side note in the book was a chapter dedicated to how Kaiser partnered with Howard Hughes in designing and fabricating the infamous Spruce Goose airplane. And if you're ever in the Portland, Oregon area, you can go see that down in McMinnville. Well, now on to our summary. It's past my bedtime, so let's wrap up this little burrito. Here's our pithy little project management lesson, and to make it further concise, I'm consolidating it down into three tips here. Unity. You may disagree at times, but everyone needs to commit to the plan of record. Otherwise, the debate may never end. As Intel succinctly puts it, disagree and commit. Number two, plan. An extra hour of planning can save you 10 hours in execution. Spend enough time to plan well. And number three, collaboration. Unless you're God, and I don't think you are, and obviously neither am I, you need to collaborate with others to get a good solution. Avoid hubris. It's not the best person who wins, it should be the best idea that wins. Alrighty, folks, that's a wrap. And remember, today's episode counts towards 0.25 hours of power skills if you're looking for continuing ed hours to maintain your PMP certification. Finally, thanks to all you listeners. We've had hundreds of downloads, and I appreciate your support. Once again, thank you for listening to Pithy Project Management, for spending a short time out of your day to sharpen the saw. You won't regret investing in yourself. This podcast was written and produced by Ben Walker. You can contact us via the podcast notes or look up Pithy Project Management on Facebook. Feel free to send in any questions, comments, suggestions, but save your complaints for your dog. Thank you. God bless and good night.